I'm Nicola Talent, and you're listening to Crime World, a podcast about criminals, drugs, and the sins of the underworld. We're Ireland's top podcast for 2025, and now we've got a new website. So if you want to learn more about crime and criminals, if you want stories, extras, and podcast subscriber specials, go to www.crimeworld.com. We're going to bring ourselves back to very dark days for the town of Drogheda and really that horrendous feud that blew up when a gang split and some underlings decided that they were going to go out and challenge Owen Maguire and his late business partner Cornelius Price for control of a very lucrative town. Drogheda is a rich town full of working people, a commuter town, and there's a pretty big cocaine market there, like there is in many other places, but given its population, etc. So these young guys had decided to split with the Maguires, we'll call them, and create their own grouping, which was known as, for usefulness sake, the anti-Maguire faction. Now, in the midst of all this, Richie Carberry, who was a brother-in-law of Robbie Lawlor, was sort of funding and helping and guiding and mentoring those younger crew because he had moved out of Dublin and up to the Meads Louth area, to Bettystown on the coast. And he saw, to get in with them and to supply them, he sort of backed the younger guys, didn't he, against the old order. Now, I've just given that little bit of background because today, Stephen Carberry, who is Richie's brother, appeared before the Special Criminal Court in relation to his role in the disposal of the murdered teenager Keane Mulready-Woods. And we will go back and explain a little bit of this in a minute. But basically, in what was pretty sensational when you phoned to say you were coming back with it, is that Stephen Carberry has pretty much blamed Robbie Lawlor and his actions on Richie Carberry's murder.
Yeah, so this was, I suppose, part of the mitigation part of the sentence hearing, where the defence lawyer Michael Bowman, who was acting for Stephen Carberry, is explaining who his client is to the judges, trying to give them reasons to, I suppose, extend some leniency to him to shorten the sentence. And one of the things they kind of went through was the profound effect, as it was called, that his brother's murder in November 2019 had on him and his family, and that he'd suffered quite badly as a result of this. And there was reference to some of the interviews that he gave to Gardaí. He was cooperative with them. And it was pointed out that, Stephen Carberry didn't work for Lawlor, but was familiar with him through his brother, and had told Gardaí that he blamed Lawlor for his death, for his brother's death, based on his previous actions. He's not saying he took part in it, but the fact that basically, I suppose that they were making the point that Richie Carberry became a target because he was married to Robbie Lawlor's sister. And that was, I suppose, that was what he was saying.
And it's ignoring that little bit of background that I've given you at the beginning of this, that Carberry was heavily involved with the younger crew who were taking on the old order in Drogheda, which was really what caused this feud.
He was actually asked, there was a Garda witness, Detective Inspector Endo Sullivan, was kind of given this evidence, about the background and to the case. And he was asked, was he cooperative, that he was obviously assisting in the interviews and giving, lots of answers. And the sergeant kind of, I suppose, initially he replied, well, it was actually self-serving. He often gave answers to questions that he knew we already knew. We had the answers. But I mean, Michael Bowman kind of rephrased his question a bit way, and the guard did agree. Look, he was actually cooperative, and he was, he was of assistance in terms of explaining nicknames and things like that. He gave them background about that, the famous video of Richie Lawlor being mugged outside a gym and losing his flip-flops, which went on to be...
And what did he say? Did they give evidence on what he had said about that?
No, they didn't, but just said that
we just have a quick timeline before we get on to this, so as anybody who's slightly lost in translation of all this, because Robbie Lawlor, Richie Carberry's brother-in-law, is in jail at the time Richie Carberry is murdered. He's in jail facing charges in relation to an alleged attack on the home of a woman called Fiona Mitchell. And Fiona Mitchell's son is going out with with Robbie Lawlor's ex-girlfriend. And he's taken it upon himself to, allegedly, arrive at her house one night with a gun. She knows she's getting threatening messages from him. And she tells the court later that he jumped over her back wall and shot into the house, killing her dog, and that herself and her son had just basically got away, by the skin of their teeth, she told the court. They were lucky to be alive. So Lawlor was already out of control at this point. He is charged in relation to that and he's placed in custody. And the trial in relation to that incident is due to come up in around the December. So in the November, some weeks previous, Lawlor's in jail awaiting this trial and he hears news that his brother-in-law, Richie Carberry, has been shot dead.
And he gets very involved then in the feud, as we know, and I suppose brings a whole new level of madness to it. So it would have been it was the 12th of January when the 17-year-old child, essentially, Keane Mulready-Woods, was lured to a house in Rathmullen in Drogheda. And Lawlor was there waiting for him, and guards believed, this is all said in court today, Gardaí believed that he was dead very shortly after being brought to the house. There was two men, Paul Crosby and Gerard Cruz, were the people who had brought him to the house and delivered him essentially to Lawlor. There was no evidence that they were involved in his killing or anything like that. And Stephen Carberry's role then was in the aftermath. So if you remember, that was Sunday he went missing. On Monday the 13th of January, he was reported missing by his mother, Elizabeth Mulready, who was in court today. And we'll come back to her. But then later that night, a black Puma sports bag was dumped in Moatview Gardens in Priorswood and Coolock. And it turns out there was basically arms and legs left in that bag. Mm-hmm. And then on the it was on the 15th of January.
And was Carberry...
Well, this is what they're getting to then. I suppose this is kind of, I suppose, before they investigated. So yeah, Rathmullen was searched then on the 14th. So we're now on to the Tuesday, and on the 15th, so they established that as the scene of the crime. And then on the 15th, this Volvo 340 was found, burning in Trinity Gardens, and the fire brigade put that out and found body parts in the boot. And it was a stolen car with false plates. So they went back and basically pieced together through CCTV footage, Carberry's involvement, which came from the 13th on. There was no evidence he had anything to do with the murder or anything to do with getting Mulready-Woods to the house or anything like that. But what happened was Crosby had been involved in getting this red Corolla that was going to be used to transport the body parts, and then it wouldn't start. And Carberry was brought in then and used this. There was this stolen Volvo, and that was used then for that part of, I suppose, the criminal operation. So
he brought in that car to be used after the other one broke down, or and then drove to Priorswood, left one bag with body parts in it, and then drove and parked the car in Artane overnight, and it was left there. And I suppose the footage, they were able to show all this through the various CCTV footage, and also then they were able to back it up with phone details as well, so they could see the phones that were being used, which he admitted that one of these phones was his. They had 3 that were actually linked to him, and then also linked to Glenn Bride, who's due back up in the Special Criminal Court next week for sentence as well for his role. And on the 14th, they were seen driving in his own in Carberry's own car to show Bride where the Volvo was parked. And then the next day, the two of them booked a taxi. They phoned a taxi firm, and their voices were recorded, and they were able to be recognised by guards. And this obviously this tape was played back to him at some point. He admitted it was his voice. And then that car was collected by Bride, and then subsequently, driven down the Malahide Road and into north inner city, where it was set on fire. Right.
So they got very detailed kind of movements.
And by another little way of background in this, so Robbie Lawlor, while he is, before he gets out, because of course he's found not guilty in relation to that aforementioned attack on the home of Fiona Mitchell, and he walks free from court in the December. And there is an SOS alert that goes out across all Garda stations, because it's known that he's out. He's been vowing vengeance for Richie Carberry, his brother-in-law's murder. Even from prison on the night he heard that Carberry had been killed, he immediately blamed the criminal we would know as Mr. Big. And he blamed him on that murder. He had previous beef for a long time with Big. He had been believed to have been the gunman who killed Mr. Big's own personal friend and assassin, a guy called Kenneth Finn. When Lawlor walked free from the court, he was set upon outside the gym, and we see that famous video of him being pushed around by the young lads. Those younger people would have been associates of Mr. Big, underlings of him. So this kind of, this tension is growing between Big and between Robbie Lawlor, and obviously into the Carberry grouping. But Robbie Lawlor has also previously been the guy who shot Owen Maguire. Maguire survives that shooting and is left in a wheelchair. So there's a lot of enemies there. But our understanding of that Drogheda feud is that Mr. Big joined forces with Price and with Maguire to try and stamp out the threat of this younger mob with the backing of Richie Carberry, with the backing of Robbie Lawlor, from taking a foothold in the town.
I suppose there was an alignment of interests that suited certain people at the time. I mean, it was an incredibly murky kind of situation for 17-year-old Keane Mulready-Woods to find himself sucked into. And some of this was actually used in I suppose, outlining the case in the Special Criminal Court today about how, for instance, Paul Crosby, who got a 10-year sentence on the same charge that Stephen Carberry has pleaded guilty to, but hasn't been sentenced yet. So it was being pointed out that 10 years is the maximum, and Crosby got that, for assisting, assisting a criminal organisation. And I suppose they were making the point that, he was completely trusted by Mulready-Woods. He'd met him, they'd walked along together, they got a taxi and then delivered him to his death. But at the same time, this kid thought he was with someone he could trust. And similarly, Jed McKenna, whose house it was, who basically surrendered his property to Lawlor, he knew Mulready-Woods and his family for years. He knew Mulready-Woods since he was a child. And they were pointing out that he got 4 years for his role. Mm-hmm. And then Jared Cruz, who was kind of centrally involved in bringing Mulready-Woods to his death, he got a 7-year sentence. So I think they're making the point that, Stephen Carberry is somewhere on the spectrum. He's probably not at the 10-year point, but they're trying to make the argument that he's somewhere below. And so this is why you're getting this kind of background. But again, you're also getting insight into the I suppose, the double crossing that was going on and the murky stuff. He's
accused, he's basically saying that he blames Robbie Lawlor on the murder of his brother, Richie Carberry. And yet this role he took up, his role in the disposal of the body parts of the teenager Keane Mulready-Woods, would have been on behalf of Lawlor. Yeah. It's only in hindsight he's obviously...
Yeah, well, I suppose
this position.
There was a phrase used, I suppose, in a way it's typical kind of barrister understatement, but they referred to Robbie Lawlor as a criminal of considerable notoriety, is the polite way of putting it.
Could call him
so
that.
There was an aspect that perhaps Carberry was kind of forced into this, or maybe not forced in, but, I suppose there was kind of a sense of duty, a perverted sense of duty to his brother's brother-in-law, so to speak. But it was mentioned, as I mentioned, that he said that he wasn't working for Lawlor, but at the same time was brought in. Now they also spoke about, they went into detail about the effect that his brother's murder had on him.
And what did they say about that? And
about the trauma he was left with, that he had attempted suicide, he suffered from depressants, he'd been on antipsychotics. That he had, there was obviously, a deep impact as well, which you wouldn't necessarily imagine that would work in your favour as mitigation. Maybe that's a reason then not to get involved in a murder yourself, or the aftermath of one, if you know what effect it's going to have on people. So I mean, it's kind of... They also went through his previous convictions. There was something like 77, 65 of which were road traffic, although there was around six of them, I think, were actually for dangerous driving. So they weren't just your run-of-the-mill parking tickets. And there was also theft, possession of a knife. But then the more there was a fairly serious one. He's currently serving 8 years. He was caught with a large stash of drugs. Section 15, possession for sale and supply, over 13,000.
And do you know when that was?
He got 8 years for that. Now, he was sentenced in 2023, but that was a stash that was found in 2016. And I suppose it just, possibly through COVID and all the rest, things were delayed, but apparently he had put in his early plea, and that was again, was being mentioned in court.
That would have been when his brother Richie was very much alive.
Yeah, it would have been
relocated to Bettystown in order to.
But it was actually mentioned they're originally from Laytown,
right?
So they're originally from that neck of the woods, and then moved into Kilbarrack. So they were kind of supposed to going back out to where they were originally from as kids.
Maybe it was Laytown. He was living. Richie Carberry, was it?
Yeah, he was
Laytown.
I think it was. Yeah. It was that area.
Yeah,
certainly. But like it was mentioned that Carberry was from there originally and moved into North Dublin and then was back out. Now, when they actually arrested him in May 2021, which is I suppose a year and a half after the murder, but they arrested him in a nice apartment block in Ballsbridge in Dublin. So, he obviously had various places that he could stay in. I guess.
Did it mention? He's 47 years of age. Is he married or children or anything like that?
Yeah, it does. They did. He's, what did you say he was, 47? Actually, they said 48 at one point as well, and then switched to 47. Right. So, he has 6 children. He's 4 from his previous marriage, and 2 from a previous relationship to that, and they're from early teens up to mid-20s. And I suppose these are the people that he was concerned about when he was being interviewed by the guards when they were asking him for more information, particularly in relation to the death of his own brother, that he was worried about what might happen to them, and wasn't giving away anything really, I suppose, in that regards.
Now, Robbie Lawlor himself was shot dead in April of 2020 in Ardoyne. There's some cases still before the courts in relation to that, and it is quite an extraordinary web of betrayal that went on. He was a kind of a dead man walking, Lawlor, for the months after Keane Mulready-Woods' murder. He was seen as a total liability. I would have thought by anybody who was working with him as well as against him, but I think the network, which included Mr. Big, Owen Maguire and Cornelius Price, were absolutely out to hopefully, in their minds, take him out of the ether, because he was so out of control. He had so many enemies, but he was shot dead then. So that left really the Carberrys with the big problem, the Carberry sort of Lawlor grouping, with the big problem that all that was left standing was Stephen, and he was facing this big drug charge. Yeah,
and it's obviously he was actually on bail for this big drug charge when he was moving Mulready-Woods' body parts around the country. So generally what happens there, it's not generally it's what happens there. What will happen is that then his sentence will start on the date when this current sentence is finished. So that was actually sought in court, and it's in May in 2028.
Yeah.
So whatever he gets, like his sentence, the actual sentence will be handed down now on the 9th of March. So whatever he gets presumably will start on that date. Now the time he's already served will be, I guess, will be taken into account. That it'll be altogether. Yeah, he's due out on the 26th of April 2028 from the current drugs charge he's on.
Now, you mentioned that Elizabeth Woods was there, the mother of Keane Mulready-Woods. She has appeared a number of times before the courts when these cases are going through. Did she have anything to say? Was there a victim impact statement?
There was a victim impact statement which she had prepared, and it was read out by counsel for the state. She didn't read it herself, but the judges did actually refer to her even before the case started. They addressed her directly and thanked her for coming to the court, and said if she has any problem hearing what's been said, just to let them know, and then make sure she can hear everything that was going on. Not that she was getting special treatment, but they were very conscious of, I suppose, the whole background to the case. So, I mean, she went through the kind of, her statement was read out. That was gone through. And they were mentioned, he was only 17. He was loved. He was part of a family. And he has a whole life ahead of him. And he wasn't treated with any dignity. He was treated as if he was something that didn't matter, that the cruelty was something that no parent should have to face. She says, knowing that the body parts were left around the country haunts her, and there isn't a day goes by when images or thoughts of that comes to mind, that the trauma lives on inside her, that the impact on her life has been devastating, and she's lost the ability to kind of lead a normal life. Just the overwhelming sadness that's there, and ordinary things are extremely difficult. She's, life is divided between before this murder and after the murder. She said the family's been destroyed, like his younger siblings, his brothers and sister. are carrying a pain that no young person should ever have to carry. And birthdays are no longer a time of joy because it's a sad reminder of that somebody is missing. Like, you know, she talked about as well, like that every time there's a court case and new details emerge, it opens the wound. And she says it feels like, you know, losing her son again. And you know, she said she'll never stop grieving. She'll always be her mother. You know, she said she wanted to speak for her son because he no longer has a voice. And she asked the judges to consider the lifelong impact and the unimaginable cruelty when they're coming up with whatever sentence. So one of the 3 panel judges, who are all women, addressed Mrs. Mulready directly, and they said, we want to pass on our condolences to you, and wanted to acknowledge kind of the statement that she'd written, that she had put a lot of time and love into preparing this, and that the pain of losing a child, they said, you can't imagine the depth of your pain. And they referred, you know, she refers to the fact that she referred to birthdays being something, and that they're different for you now, and that's coming up quite soon. The 5th of February is his birthday. So, and that was, you know, reflected by one of the judges had said that, you know, this is coming up. And I mean, it's like we're coming up to, like he was killed on the 12th of January. So, I mean, it's 6 years ago, really, since this happened. And that was something that Barry Woods, his father, also mentioned at the start of his victim impact statement, was also read out in court. I suppose it was a bit shorter. But he said, look, if 6 years is coming up to 6 years, but it says it feels like happened yesterday, that time is standing still. And he says, why do men, you know, with families of their own, do this to a 17-year-old? And he said, to have a funeral without all these body parts, and then 18 months later finding, you know, more the skeletal remains that were found separately, eaten by animals, as he put it, that they had to be cremated. Horrible was the word he used to describe it. He says he still gets nightmares about it. He said his brothers and sister, mother and friends have been robbed of him. He never got to see his 18th or 21st birthday. Never got to have a family, nothing like this. No parents deserve this. And he said he hopes that those cruel men get what they deserve and they never get to destroy another family like they did ours. So it was powerful kind of
Very
stuff.
much so. And how did Stephen Carberry conduct himself during this?
He stayed calm. Like, I mean, there was no emotion showed. Like, he spoke to his legal team immediately afterwards and was taken away. I suppose he won't know his fate, like, you know, how much extra time he's going to be in prison for, and whether it's going to be, you know, a 10 years stretch on top of what he's already serving, or it'll be something less. But like, he didn't seem, you know, particularly...
He was emotionless.
Yeah, I suppose you put on a poker face, I think, in a lot of these people in this situation.
Yeah. But no, it is a fascinating thing that he said, that he blames Lawlor on Richie Carberry's murder, because, like, you know, that's a very black and white kind of an attitude to it, isn't it? I mean, Carberry was very much there in that feud, kind of giving the backing.
Yeah, I suppose he's kind of talking about it in a sense that, like, if his brother had never met Robbie Lawlor's sister, this would never have happened. But we do know that there was another attempt on Richie Carberry's life a couple of months before that in 2019, and that was the Maguire faction were blamed for that one.
Yes,
so,
and Carberry was very well aware that he was under threat. In actual fact, he was moving to the UK. He had found accommodation for himself and his family there, because he was aware that he was seen as being, you know, a leader nearly of one side of that feud.
And there was active threats against Stephen Carberry as well, which he was aware of.
Right.
And that was mentioned in court today again, I suppose, hinting at his kind of state of mind at the time when he carried out this, I suppose, grotesque act of carrying body parts.
And, like, not to defend Robbie Lawlor, obviously, but, you know, there's more to it than simply one person is to blame, you would think. I mean, Lawlor was an absolute chaotic, out of control individual by the time this all happened. I mean, even his own family were worried about him and how he was behaving. But, you know, I'm not sure that it's right to saddle all the blame on Robbie Lawlor when you have an individual who has willingly involved in massive, wide-scale drug trafficking and is backing one element of a criminal gang against another.
Yeah, I mean, the drug stash that he was put away for was $1.5 million worth of cannabis and ecstasy.
Carberry himself,
Stephen Carberry. So again, you know, it wasn't small time. It wasn't small time stuff. You know, whether or not it was, what level of the chain he was at, but he certainly wasn't at the very bottom. And there's even more kind of hints at the murkiness of what this was all about. Like, for instance, they talked about the Puma sports bag. And so apparently there was, as it was put, they took DNA samples from the objects within, which we know them to be the arms and legs, but also from the bag itself. And there's 4 different DNA samples. So one was Stephen Carberry's, but there was others. And one of those was linked to a person who had been seen like the previous December driving the stolen Volvo that had been nicked in Sandymount and had been obviously driven. It used the apple green and Lusk, so it was obviously being driven back up towards Louth, that area. And this is the car then used to move the body parts. So again, it just shows you that there was a lot of people involved. There was a lot of moving parts between this gang and their associates.
For sure. And we're just saying there, so this is Stephen Carberry is the 5th person to be convicted in relation to this. You have, as you've mentioned, Gerard Jed McKenna, and he's the 55-year-old that owned the house that was used, right? You have Gerard Cruz, who had driven Keane Mulready-Woods to Rathmullen Park. You have Stephen Carberry, who we've spoken about today. Another co-accused, Glenn Bride, who's a 32-year-old who's also pleaded guilty at the Special Criminal Court to assisting in the movement and disposal of the teenager's body parts.
And Paul Crosby.
Of course, there's Paul Crosby.
Who was a key player in the violent feud that was going on. Like, he wasn't, he's seen as a serious operator in that regard. So, I mean,
And Robbie Lawlor, who's been named in court as the killer since his death. So that's six of them. Is the investigation still ongoing, do you know, or is there anybody else in the mix?
Well, there is this unknown DNA on one of the bags, and then it did mention that there was another person prosecuted in relation to. I'm not sure whether the way it was phrased. I'm not sure if it was in relation to the murder or whether it was in relation to the stolen car. And some of the council themselves didn't know that this had happened, which suggests that might be a juvenile involved and it wasn't necessarily publicised at the time.
Okay. Oh, anyway, look, that was a really interesting case anyway. So he's back for sentence in March.
Yeah, and he'll, I suppose, learn his fate then, how much longer he's going to stay inside.
Okay, thanks, Eamon.
It was a pleasure, Nicola.